Okay, we're going handheld. So thank you, Chris. You've seen the agenda. So to begin with this morning, you're getting a brilliant 2-for-1 deal. So you're getting 2 presentations for 1. You're getting me talking about a very macro perspective of brands, and I've got some questions for you as well. And I'm also going to talk about what makes the most valuable brands in the world so successful. And then, in the second part of the deal, you've got Adele Jolliffe, who's down there. Give us a wave, Adele. And Adele is going to zoom in for a longer period of time and unpack some great insights and implications for UK brands specifically. So 2 for 1, already giving you value. Okay, so I said I was going to ask you guys some questions. So one really simple question, and then there's a harder one to think about. So can you put your hand up if you've ever been asked a difficult question as part of a job interview? Not quite everybody, that's a surprise. So potentially some arrogance in the room or some great ability perhaps. I certainly have. And actually there's some people in this room who've asked me some difficult interview questions, naming no names. Adele down there, thank you. So I'm going to ask you my favourite interview question. And I ask this of new graduates all the way through to senior directors looking for jobs in brand within Kantar, within the BrandZ team as well. So please take a seat. I can see you already have. Hopefully you're comfortable. It's a really short question. It's only 4 words, so it should be an easy one, right? Is everyone ready? Okay, here it comes. What is a brand? Seems like an easy question. Never have I seen 4 words induce such panic in graduates, in senior directors, people with lots of experience, and it is a very difficult question. So what I could do is be quite mean at this point, and I could pick on someone from the audience to give us an answer. Or I could even get someone from the audience up on stage to give us their answer. In the trade, that's called a dramatic pause. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that to you. It's far too early for that. So I'm going to talk about what I look for in an answer to this question. So what I look for is not a textbook parroted response. I look for somebody who's able to answer this question in their own way, and every single person in this room should have an answer to that question, given the nature of the industry we're in. So if you're sat there thinking, oh, if you dragged me on stage, I think I'd struggle to answer that question in a coherent way, that's a problem. So take some time and think about how you'd answer that question. And given that we've got some networking coming up in about half an hour, 45 minutes, if you want, feel free to come and find me, give me your answer to that question, I'll give you my answer to that question, and who knows, I may even offer you the job. But the point is, the concept of brand is very difficult to define. It seems easy, but actually, as I said, I've seen lots of people go to pieces in trying to define it over the years. The concept of brand is nebulous, it's cloudy, it's intangible. Why does it matter? That's something we'll come back to. We'll get to that shortly. But I've now got an even bigger question for you. Why are we here? And I don't mean that in an incredibly existential sense. I mean, why are we here together in this room today? And there are 2 sides to our audience today, obviously. So clearly there are a lot of marketers, clients in the room, and I think you guys are here to hear from Kantar, learn some insights around how to build and guide your brands, and to unlock that hidden intangible value of brand that I talked about earlier. But also, we've got a number of Kantar people in the room today, and we are here to listen to you, to help you, to support you in your journey of doing just that. Okay, so we are able to take that nebulous, unstructured, intangible concept of brand, and through the skills and expertise that Chris mentioned earlier, we're able to help you release tangible value to your business. And we can do that by supporting your strategy and helping you course correct along the way. One thing that we've learned over the years from BrandZ is why it's important to actually invest in brands in the first place. So BrandZ is a huge database of brands. We interview thousands of respondents every year. Over the course of the years, we've built a database of over 4 million consumers and sets of interviews about brands. We've been building that database since way back in 1998, so for nearly a quarter of a century. And one of the key things that we do with that data is we fuel brand valuations. And BrandZ's brand valuation system is the only one in the industry that draws on the depth of consumer data to input critically into our brand valuation process. So going back to the question I asked in terms of why does brand building matter? Many of you will have seen this slide before. It matters because ultimately brands that are strong, that have strong equity relative to competitors, are able to guide decision making and deliver an advantage in shareholder returns. So just to explain this slide in a bit more detail, some of you may have seen it before, but we began way back in 2006 with our first ever global top 100 most valuable brands launch. Since that point, we've tracked 4 indices of share price effectively. The S&P 500, the MSCI World Index, but 2 indices of BrandZ brands as well. Brands with strong equity and brands with really strong equity. So the first thing you can see is that the 2 BrandZ indices outperform both S&P and MSCI. So our first basic insight as to why brand building matters is brand building matters because we know brands with strong equity deliver better returns to shareholders. But there are a couple of big crises on this chart, which you can also see, and that gives us other reasons to invest in brand. The financial crisis, the financial crash of 2008, and obviously much more recently, the COVID-19 crisis. And you can see all 4 of those indices dipped during those very difficult periods for the world. But what you'll notice about brands with strong equity, the purple line and the yellow line, is that they were more resilient when those crises hit, but they also recovered much faster post-crisis as well. So that's 3 very good reasons to invest in brand, to invest in marketing, delivering shareholder returns, protecting your brand in difficult times, and recovering faster after difficult times. So that is why building strong brands matters. And the proof is in the pudding. So this chart basically shows the progress of our global top 100 most valuable brands year on year since we launched our first ranking in 2006. And you can see in the last 12 months in 2022, taking those 100 brands as a collective, they've actually grown as a collective by 23% year on year. And that 23% growth is actually twice the average annual growth rate since we launched our global ranking. So we're seeing that our intangible brands are still very much adding tangible value to businesses, even in the tumultuous period that we're living through right now. That is, of course, if those brands are nurtured, they're invested in, and they're managed and guided effectively. So this is a question for me rather than you. You'll be glad to hear. So in simple terms, what is the magic ingredient? How have the world's most valuable brands actually achieved this growth? How have they unlocked that intangible asset into tangible value? And they do it through making powerful connections in a number of ways. They make powerful mental and physical connections with their consumers and their customers. They harness the power of brand to make internal connections, to communicate core principles and strategy and align their businesses. They also make powerful connections with the media to support their public persona. And perhaps most importantly, a few laughs there, can you guess what it is yet? They connect with the investment community and they connect with their shareholders. So actually, the world's most successful brands are absolutely not nebulous clouds of gas. They are meaningful constellations of connection. And with more connected thinking, your brand can unlock the true value of brand, and we at Kantar are here to help you achieve just that. I'll leave that there if you want a photo. I can see a few people taking photos. Big thanks to our design team for that, by the way. I did not do that slide myself. I wish I had. I should have said I had, actually. Okay, so the last thing from me today is to unveil Kantar BrandZ's top 75 most valuable UK brands for 2022. I will then pass you over to Adele, who's going to unpack all those great insights about UK brands specifically. Thank you.
Okay, there we have it. This year's BrandZ top 75 most valuable UK brands. I think they deserve a round of applause. What do you think? Wonderful. Now, shortly, some of the brands you can see here on the screen behind me are going to be on this very stage in conversation with Russell Parsons, Editor-in-Chief at Marketing Week. But before that, you're going to spend a little bit more time with me, and we're going to do two things. In a second, we're going to delve a little bit more into this top 75, look at the trends versus last year, put them into some context. But then we're going to do the really important thing, the so what, the implications. What do these results tell us, landing at this point in time in this economic and consumer climate? What can you learn from them? What thoughts or questions might they spark? First of all, though, a couple of logistics. You should all have a rather glamorous event brochure, I think. If you haven't looked at it yet, get it out and have a look, because there are some pages in that brochure especially made for you to write down your key takeouts, maybe any questions this raises for you, your next steps, that kind of thing. So feel free. There's a space for this presentation. There's one for our presentation later. So feel free to be jotting things down that's helpful as we go through. And the second thing is that Josh just handed me an iPad down here, because an iPad is a prize on offer later on in this morning's session. There'll be a short quiz after Russell Parsons has completed his panel discussion. And all of the answers to those quiz questions are in the presentation you're about to see. Oh, yes. So don't need to do anything else with that yet, apart from watch and listen very carefully. So let's kick off then by taking a closer look at this list behind me. The big news, of course, you just saw there in the video, is Vodafone is once again this year our #1 most valuable brand in the UK. And they continue a strong trend of that. They've been in that position for the last few years. In fact, the top three remains exactly the same as 2021. Vodafone in first place, HSBC in number 2, and Shell in number 3. The top 10 actually is pretty similar to last year. A couple of brands have switched a couple of places. The big news there really being that Barclays enters the top 10 at number 10 after moving up from, number 12 last year. Some more cheers here maybe. We've got 4 new entrants into the top 75 this year. We've got Pets at Home at number 70, Fever Tree at 58, and we've got 2 financial investment companies, Hargreaves Lansdown at 31 and St James's Place at 18. Our fastest riser this year is Revolut, a brand value increase of almost 500%, shifting from number 72, where they were last year, all the way over to that far left-hand side this year at number 15. More on Revolut to come later. But first of all, let's take a look at some more of the findings. And we're going to start with the total value of the top 75 and compare that to how it's changed versus last year. It's up 1%. So it's not declining, but it's not quite the step change that we saw since 2020 to 2021, or indeed the change between 2019 and 2021. So let's put that 1% into some context and see if we can understand it a bit better. If we compare it, first of all, to the global top 100, Martin just showed you that that increased by 23% this year. So it's some way behind that. UK GDP in 2021 increased by 7.4%. And the forecasts for the global economy this year, while they're varying a bit day to day, are about sort of 3.5%. So 1% is stable. It's steady. What it's not is another step change. And when we isolate the brand equity data, what consumers think and feel about the brands in the top 75, and as Martin said, that's a key part of the brand value calculation, we do see some vulnerability for the UK top 75 brands versus the global top 100. What you're looking at here are the 3 pillars of brand equity. It's how we measure brands for our clients, and it's the methodology that underpins the BrandZ dataset. Salient over here on the right is a brand coming to mind quickly in relation to a range of category-relevant needs or occasions. Think mental availability. In the middle, different, is a brand being perceived to be different in some way, tangibly or intangibly, and to be dynamic, to be leading the category, not following everybody else. And over on the left, meaningful is rational and emotional affinity. People believe the brand meets their needs and they like it more than others. Now, these three things are really important because combined in different ways, they predict a brand's market share and the price it can charge relative to category average. Their role here today is to tell us something about the average brand in the UK top 75. On all three elements, the top 75 brands, they're better than your overall average brand, but as a group, they're consistently lacking versus the global top 100. But hang on, Adele, I hear you thinking. The global top 100 brands are the cream of the cream. There is quite literally no single more valuable brand in the known universe. That is true. But it's not just here where we see this finding. Here you're looking at those same three equity pillars, meaningful, different, and salient. But this time the other bars are the average scores for the most valuable brands of other individual markets. Markets like China, India, Brazil, Italy. Consistently, the UK sits in penultimate position. The UK is middle to bottom of the table. It's like being the third or fourth biggest brand in a market. It's tricky. It's not disaster by any means, but it's not what we might call excelling. And when you put these results in the context of the current economic and consumer climate that Chris was talking about, that tells us this. It's the right time to be looking at what could shake things up, what could push the UK top 75 from the middle of the table to the top. It's time to dare to be different. There are three ways that we think today's results in today's context point to how you, insights, marketing, and business leaders could be thinking and acting differently. The first is to think differently about value. A lot of marketing outcomes focus on volume share and therefore on building mental availability, fame, and relevance. But this can overshadow the pricing power of a brand. Not only is pricing power an under-celebrated role of strong brands, but now more than ever, knowing if your brand can justify the price you're trying to charge is essential. Today, we'll talk about how you can get a firm handle on that and what you can do about it. Second, pursue brand difference, not just meaning. The past decade or so has seen a big focus on customer centricity. That is, putting the human beings, your current and future customers, at the heart of your strategic planning. But there's a groundswell of an important balancing argument to that, which is that brands don't need to just be meaningful and relevant to grow sales and margins. They also need to be perceived as different to their competition. And to do this, brands need to solve a paradox of when and how to change and when and how to stay the same. We'll talk about why that matters and what that looks like. And finally, set different category and consumer expectations, the power of innovation and disruption across a wide variety of brand encounters. Finding new ways to meet existing needs, spotting and surfing new needs, setting different expectations of customer and user experience, pushing new creative boundaries. These are all leadership behaviours that change category and consumer expectations. We'll look at why this is your best short-term defence and long-term attack. So, in his book, The Premium Brand, Nigel Hollis wrote that the ultimate role of a brand is to command a price premium over comparable products. And right now, that has very sharp relevance. That's because 53% of people say they're planning to trade down to lower prices or buy less overall. This week, I'm sure we all saw Aldi became the UK's fourth biggest supermarket. And the latest Kantar World Panel data shows sales of store brand products increasing by 20%. People will edit their repertoires. And as Helen Edwards wrote in Marketing Week recently, some brands will get dropped altogether. But it won't be price alone that determines which brands will make the cut. Kantar World Panel data shows that even in households that say they are financially vulnerable, whilst they do have a greater share of their spend in budget lines, they still buy from premium and super premium ranges. There are contexts, motivations, and emotions at play in what matters to people in those choice moments. It's not just about price. It's about the trickier areas of worth or value. It's about whether your brand's equity in people's heads can justify the price you want to charge. And for some brands, that aligns. For others, it doesn't. And when that happens, it can create opportunities or risks. What you're looking at here is thousands of brands from hundreds of categories in the BrandZ dataset plotted on 2 dimensions. First, their price index relative to category on the horizontal axis, and second, the equity of those brands in people's heads on the vertical axis, represented here by our metric of pricing power. The first thing to notice is that there's a pretty good relationship between the two. The second thing is that it's not perfect. There are brands that are struggling to justify their price, and there are brands whose equity suggests they're worth more than they're currently charging. So we can unpack this graph and create 9 simple segments where brands could sit. So this is using exactly the same axes, difference from category average price along the bottom and pricing power up the side, but we've simplified it and labelled the 9 boxes. Take a box like justified premium. Some of the BrandZ top 75 brands sit in that box. Brands like Pets at Home and Sky. Now hang on. They're not perhaps the first brands to mind when we might think about premium brands, but that's a really important point. Pricing power isn't just relevant to brands that are trading at the super premium end of sectors. The question of whether your brand has sufficient pricing power is far more fundamental than that. Whatever price your brand needs to charge relative to category average, the knowledge of whether its equity can justify that is essential to the diagnosis of your brand today and how you might define your strategy going forward. And, like when we just looked at the brand equity data, if we take the UK top 75 brands and we look at how they fall out across these 9 boxes, we see some vulnerability here too. Just over a quarter of the UK top 75 sit in segments where the brands are at risk of not justifying their price. The big question for you is, where would your brand sit? What if your strategic plans included actions that would increase the worth or the pricing power of your brands? Well, certainly it would mean your plan would have a good chance of improving your bottom line. In work we've done here at Kantar, we've seen that even price-driven people who say, brand makes no difference to my choice, I always just take the cheapest option, even they pay more for brands they consider to be worth it. 14% more, to be precise. So it's a critical question to ask. Is your brand worth it? But what does that really mean? Well, ask not if your brand is worth it. Ask if your brand is meaningfully different, because that's what defined the difference between the brands people were willing to pay more for. Those price-conscious people, those who said, brand does not matter, I always choose the cheapest option, they, in reality, paid 14% more for brands they considered to be more meaningful and more different than the competition. Let's take a look at a couple of brands in this year's ranking that do this very well. And the first is Pets at Home, a brand very dear to my own heart. They have surfed the wave of a growing category by pairing together an ecosystem of services with a personalised experience to create a customer lifetime value strategy. They've added new services to their offer, so they now offer vet and grooming services on site in a one-stop shop, and they're utilising customer data really well. They've got an award-winning app where the number of users is up 20% year on year, and over a quarter of their VIPs, yes, very important pets, have shopped across more than one channel, and that number is also increasing. And the consumer perspective is clear. People think that compared to competitors, Pets at Home care for their customers and are the best at what they do. And we're very pleased to welcome them into the top 75 this year. The second brand is Sky. Sky have created a blockbuster combination of presence, partnerships and personalisation. They are consistently one of the most visible brands in the UK. They're often in the top 3 advertisers, and they show an exemplary command of owned media, those incredible vans up and down the roads of the country on a day-to-day basis. They've faced into some category challenges by, for example, partnering with streaming services, making it easier for customers to access them by bundling them together instead of choosing between them. And they're very experimental with customer data to great effect. They're also the 6th most valuable brand in the UK ranking this year. It's worth noting for both of these how a blend of brand and experience, of promise and delivery across multiple platforms and channels underpins their pricing power. So, when it comes to thinking differently about the value your brand is offering to people and to your business, the question to be asking yourself is this: does your brand have sufficient pricing power? The next way to think about thinking and acting differently is about strengthening people's belief that your brand is different, not just meaningful. In other words, being relevant in a unique way. Now, the power of creating and maintaining relevance has dominated strategic planning over the last few years, particularly in the shape of customer centricity. And as Mark Evans said in the recent Insight Growth Report from the Marketing Society, these are volatile times, and volatility makes marketing more important than ever, because the necessity to understand what the customer really wants becomes even more pronounced. And there's no doubt being customer-centric in your thinking is beneficial. In our recent Insights 2030 study, understanding the human side of consumers was a defining characteristic of leading companies compared to trailing companies. But is that enough? And are there any risks in being too myopic about customer centricity? Well, Sarah Bennison, now ex-CMO of Nationwide, thinks so. She says, so I do worry sometimes that although it's marvellous to put the customer at the heart of everything, it's really dangerous from a differentiation point of view. What does she mean? Well, she explains further that if you follow customer-centric research and UX testing, you'll create, for example, a great customer journey that's exactly the same as your competitors. In other words, there's a tightrope to be walked about where it's okay to be the same as everyone else and where you need to be different. And that really matters because being different is worth money. The more unique a brand is perceived to be, the more it's believed to be worth paying more for. Put another way, your sales and margin are at risk if people perceive they have nothing to lose from choosing an alternative brand. When we look at some meta-analysis of the BrandZ dataset, we can see the powerful role that difference plays. Earlier, we were looking at brands' pricing power. Over 94% of that is explained by how meaningful and different brands are perceived to be. Contrast this with what drives a brand's demand power, which correlates with volume share. Meaningful and different together explain only 58% because salience or mental availability is pulling a lot more weight. Now, there are many ways a brand can be different. Dom will go into some more detail on this in his session later. But for now, we're going to focus on just one, and it links to the question that Sarah Bennison raised. It's about a brand knowing not just when to be different, but how to be different, consistently different to the competition. How to ensure that whether it's in communications, packaging, a website, or a retail space, that the brand shows up in the same way, different to the competition, but authentic to itself and congruent across time and touchpoint. And this matters because it links directly to how brands are built in the brain. I'm sure you're all aware of this brilliant quote from Jeremy Bullmore, but it bears repeating here. People build brands the way birds build nests, through the straws and scraps they chance upon. Little connections are made in the memory across lots and lots of big and small encounters, sometimes across a whole lifetime. And if the brand is showing up in a consistent, congruent way across all of those big and small encounters, if it feels the same and it's aligned with what you expect from it, it will have what we might call strong emotive clarity. And brands with strong emotive clarity score 13 points higher on brand difference, the very same brand difference that is so integral to pricing power. If we can refer to what Mark Evans was talking about as human centricity, we might call what Sarah Bennison was talking about brand centricity, and both are needed for the most powerful brand strategy and execution. The balance of the two together help a brand walk this difficult tightrope, how to constantly change to remain relevant, and how to stay the same to maintain strong clarity. Here's a brand, another new entry to our top 75 this year, that does it very well. Fever-Tree. Fever-Tree is very human-centric. They're very good at finding the new peripheral trend and making it easy for people to get on board with it. For example, their latest range of sodas, which is speaking to the spritz trend. 2 times more of their market share comes from new products compared to the rest of the category. They know how to change and adapt to meet and nurture new needs and occasions. But their focus on human centricity is mixed, if you will, to perfection with complementary brand centricity. The brand has built and cemented strong emotive clarity despite the constant evolution through expansion and partnerships. Their original pioneering spirit, the pursuit of excellence, the discernment and selectivity is in everything that they do. And this emotion is reinforced through the way the brand is packaged, embossed glass bottles, sleek, sophisticated labelling, using watermarks and touches of silver, as well as the way the products are named, not tonic with orange flavour, but Italian blood orange or Spanish clementine. Through its communications and its digital touchpoints, through the partnerships it chooses and the way it shows up at physical events, they pay attention to the detail, emphasising natural ingredients and elevating the sense of occasion. Critically, this is also evident in the physical experience of the product itself. And of course, the consumption of Fever-Tree often happens in ways that are out of their control. And in the spirit of getting people to care about the choice of mixer, they've invested in encouraging people to do the product justice in their own homes. Think about the serving ratio, the flavour combination, the glass used, the temperature of serve, all important to the experience being congruent with the brand promise. All of this means that wherever or however you encounter the brand, you expect and experience something uniquely Fever-Tree. So when it comes to pursuing brand difference, not just meaning, the question to ask is, are you applying both human-centric and brand-centric thinking in your plans and strategies? Finally, setting different category and consumer expectations, innovating and disrupting. And the UK top 75 brands show some vulnerability here too. The global top 100 brands, on average, are way ahead for these indicators of innovation, like shaking things up or being a brand that will gain importance in the future. And that's maybe not too surprising, as the outlook for innovation over the past couple of years has been pretty bleak. Kantar World Panel tell us that NPD is down 5% year on year and 16% over the past 2 years. And right now, this matters more than ever. Why? Well, because right now, something called the asymmetry principle is likely affecting a huge number of brands in this very room. In a nutshell, at times of budget pressure, people trade down, differently across individuals and sectors, but in general it happens. And as a result, branded products lose market share. When budget pressures are eased, not everyone comes back. Growth for private label brands during recession is 4 times the amount they decline during expansion. Branded products don't get back what they lost. There's asymmetry in the dynamic. Why does this happen? Well, simply, people find little difference in quality or efficacy after they make the switch. There's no reason to go back to paying the higher prices. Now, a follow-up study to the one that identified the asymmetry principle showed that the best counter to it was tangible innovation, giving people a reason to re-examine their price-worth ratio for your brand. The asymmetry principle tells us, therefore, that innovation is your best short-term defense and long-term attack. And it's big and small things that make the difference. Kantar World Panel had a report last year about the most successful NPD in 2021. Now, it's big and small things, it really is. So innovating to meet new occasions. Has anyone had these? They are amazing. If you haven't tried them, get some on your way home. Innovating to meet new occasions helped Jaffa Joe Nuts be the 10th most successful innovation of the year. Should have been number 1 for the name alone, I think, but it went on sales apparently, I don't know. So yeah, innovating to meet new occasions. A relatively small thing, but actually fantastic for incremental sales for Jaffa. Addressing a pain point. How difficult it is to fill the side pocket on a conventional pitter. First world problem, yes, but Warburton's addressed it with soft pitters and secured themselves the 5th most successful innovation in 2021. And if anyone here lives in the UK, I'm sure plenty of us do, and you realise you can only dry your washing outside for like 2 days a year, and when you dry it inside, it doesn't smell very nice. That insight led to Lenore Outdoorable. A very relevant insight that will make your clothes smell like you dried them outside, securing them the top place as the most successful innovation of 2021. Another innovation in that top 10 came from our next brand, Cadbury. Did anyone buy Caramilk last year? Oh my goodness me, yes. Caramilk, I think thanks to Amy and myself, was the #2 most successful innovation in 2021. Now, Cadbury have a really interesting approach to innovation. They reach out in many different ways. So they have partnerships with organisations like the Prince's Trust. They tap into cultural events like the Jubilee special edition of Roses. They create really clever mashups from an already very familiar and popular portfolio like the Twirl Breakaway. And isn't it remarkable to see one of the most established brands in British culture exceeds the market average for leading the way and shaking things up? Cadbury, number 13 in our ranking, saw their brand value increase by 11% this year. And we couldn't not mention Revolut, our fastest riser this year. It's still a small brand within the context of its competitors, but there are several indicators of future success. Revolut has the second highest different score in the category, and it has twice the demand power, a measure that correlates with volume share, amongst people under 35 compared to people over 35. Apologies to most of us in this room. It's a story of tangible, disruptive innovation, such as access to cryptocurrency or the Revolut Junior account, alongside more recognisable services. In short, Revolut is setting a new benchmark for the more established brands in the sector. So when it comes to setting different category and consumer expectations, the question to be asking yourself is your brand a leader or a laggard? So that's our 3 ways that you might think and act differently. But there's one other thing I'm sure you have noticed. All of these require investment. So there is one more way for you to think and act differently, and it directly concerns you, the insights, marketing, and business leaders in the audience today. You might need to swim against the tide. You might have to win some difficult discussions, challenging the likely pressure externally and internally to cut or maybe stop brand investment. To do that, you will have to tell a bigger story. A story of why playing it safe is not safe, why you should be bold, why you shouldn't shoot just for volume share, but consider the value your brand offers to people and that it can create for your business, why you should build value. And why it helps to know the way your brand uniquely shows up in the world and have that live across all encounters people have with it. Why you must bring your brand to life. And we hope today is giving you some of the impetus, the inspiration, and critically, the evidence to help you dare to be different. Thank you.